It was a beautiful, starry summer night, and the Weston family was gathered in their cozy old truck camper in the mountains. The adults were sitting around the table playing cards and listening to music when Aunt Cass spoke.
"We should all go on a starlight walk," she said.
Mother, father, and Uncle Brent liked the idea, but the two young brothers, Tommy and Mark, were tired from a long day of swimming in the lake and more in the mood to stay back in the camper alone. The adults allowed this, and they stood up to leave together. "We'll be gone for about an hour," said their mother. The grown-ups then departed, the sound of their voices trailing away into the darkness. Soon, only the chirping of crickets remained. With no adults around, the boys were free to do whatever they wanted. They were rolling around on top of each other, throwing pillows, jumping all over the place. It seemed they weren't as tired as they let on. But soon the exhaustion did catch up with them, so they turned off most of the lights and retired to the bed up above the cab. Tommy grabbed a flashlight from the little cabinet near his pillow and began to tell ghost stories to his younger brother. The first story was about a haunted schoolhouse. It wasn't very scary. The second story, about a babysitter being called on the phone by some crazy person who was actually upstairs the entire time, was much better. At about midnight, it was Mark's turn to tell a story, but halfway through he was interrupted by a strange vibration that shook everything in the camper. This was accompanied by a low-pitched hum. It lasted only a few moments and then stopped.
"What was that?"
asked Mark. "I don't know. Probably an airplane."
"I don't think so. Maybe it was an earthquake."
Tommy got up and walked to the door with Mark following closely behind. He opened it and looked around outside. Above them was a light in the starry night sky. "See, it's just an airplane, like I said," proclaimed the older brother.
"It doesn't look like an airplane to me,"
Mark replied. The light seemed to pass by and disappear somewhere behind the trees. The brothers forgot all about it and returned to the bed where they continued telling stories. At 12:30, the adults still hadn't returned back to the campground. Tommy was concerned. Where are they? They should have been back by now. Shortly after, there came another sound. This time it was a high-pitched buzzing, followed by the sound of tree branches snapping outside. The boys looked at each other. "What was that?" cried Tommy.
"Tommy, I'm scared,"
said Mark, frightened. The older boy tried to stay calm. He peeked through all the little curtains that surrounded them up there in the bed, but he could see only the silhouette of trees, faintly illuminated by starlight.
"Tommy,"
Mark asked his brother,
"will you go lock the door?"
Tommy rolled his eyes, but agreed. He climbed down in his pajamas, and when he reached the middle of the camper, secured the lock on the door. "Maybe it's a bear," he said, half joking, as he returned to the loft.
"It can't get us in here, can it?"
Tommy laughed. No. Tommy wasn't quite sure what the sounds were. He and Mark soon agreed to close all the curtains. For the longest time there was only silence. The boys had stopped telling stories and were now just listening. When a new sound finally came, they instantly broke into a cold sweat. This time it was a scratching coming from the rear window of the camper, followed by an unexplainable high-pitched squeak. Then the sounds stopped. Mark's eyes were wide with fear.
"Tommy!"
he whispered loudly. "Shh!" The boys listened as the weird noises started up again and began to move around the side of the camper, closer to the front. When the sounds finally reached the cab, they stopped. Bodies tense and sweaty, the pair lay motionless on the mattress, trying not to make a sound. Tommy whispered into Mark's ear, "I'm going to have a look outside." He took a deep breath, trying to build up the courage to open up the curtain. It took him a moment, but finally he went for it. He reached out and pulled back the old red fabric. Through the little pane of glass staring back at him from the darkness was a hideous face. Tommy froze when he saw it. The unknown thing before him filled his entire view. It was all white, and it looked like a giant insect, only with a long, serrated, saw-like duckbill and dark horizontal slits for eyes. The face was lit by a bizarre, glowing, multicolored strand that hung around the creature's neck. Tommy tore the curtain closed and screamed out in terror, but no sound came. He could not even breathe. He was paralyzed with fear.
"What did you see?"
his little brother whispered. Tommy grabbed Mark, pulling him to the corner of the loft, and threw the blanket over both of them. He held his little brother tightly, trying not to breathe. It was all he could do. Mark could feel his older brother shaking violently.
"Tommy, what did you see?"
But the older brother did not respond. Then it happened. Someone or something was at the locked door. Tommy held his brother even tighter. The door was somehow opening. Tommy felt his body turn to ice. There was a pause, followed by footsteps in the darkness. Someone or something was now in the camper with them. Mark began to whimper. The brothers held each other tighter and tighter as the footsteps approached the loft. Suddenly the lights came on, and through the fabric of the blanket something could be seen moving toward them. Tommy had never been as afraid as he was at that moment. This can't be real, thought the boy. This has to be some kind of dream. The loft curtains were yanked back and the blanket torn from the bed. Tommy and Mark both screamed and screamed. But when they looked up, the boys saw only their parents and their aunt and uncle looking back. They had finally returned from their walk. The children reached out to their mother and father, clawing at them in desperate terror. But as they tried to embrace their parents, they sensed that something was not right. They looked up at the grown-ups, who towered above them. They all had the same strange, blank look on their faces. Their eyes were empty and unfamiliar. They stared down at the children with a dark and hollow gaze. Then together, their mother, father, aunt, and uncle opened their mouths, and out came a low, guttural voice, speaking in unison, as one.
"It's time."